Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We always talk about those magical first moments after a baby is born, that instant connection between a mother and her child. But what if I told you that the groundwork for that relationship is actually laid much earlier? Like way before the baby even arrives.
It's so true. We tend to focus on that moment of birth,
Yeah.
but the reality is that the emotional foundation of the mother-child bond starts developing during pregnancy.
Exactly. And today we're really diving into this fascinating concept. We're going to be looking at some really cutting edge research that sheds light on just how powerful those prenatal connections can be.
Absolutely. This research is coming out of Thomas Jefferson University. A team led by Dr. Norma Medina and her colleagues at the University of Chicago did some really amazing work here, and luckily for us, it was picked up by Neuroscience News.
Perfect. And you know what? I'm really excited about this because this research suggests that these early connections, these bonds that form while the baby is still in the womb, can actually have a lasting impact on the relationship between the mother and child for years to come.
Oh, for sure. This isn't just some fleeting feeling.
Yeah.
We're talking about something that can influence things all the way into toddlerhood, even beyond.
Exactly. So, in this deep dive, what we really want to do is unpack these findings, right? Figure out what they mean for us, for parents, for anyone who cares about early childhood development, and how we can use this knowledge to better support new mothers.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the first things that jumps out from this study, and it's a pretty huge finding, is that young mothers who felt a really strong emotional connection to their babies during pregnancy,
Mm.
those who really felt that bond early on, were much more likely to have really healthy and positive relationships with those kids later.
Wow. Okay, so we're not just talking about a warm, fuzzy feeling here. We're talking about something measurable, something that can predict the future of that relationship.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that they actually followed these families for quite a while. They tracked them until the children were around 2.5 years old, so like 30 months.
Okay, so well into toddlerhood. That's a significant chunk of time. So basically, we're seeing that this isn't just a temporary thing. This bond formed during pregnancy really has staying power.
Exactly. And this completely changes how we think about those quiet moments during pregnancy, right? It shows that those feelings, those connections, are having a real, tangible impact on that future relationship.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think, especially for our listeners, because this research also challenges some of those outdated stereotypes about young mothers, especially those in low-income situations. Unfortunately, there are these negative assumptions out there about their parenting ability.
Oh, absolutely. And, these stereotypes are so harmful and unfair. But the great thing about this study is that it pushes back against those generalizations. What they found was that the vast majority of these young moms actually reported having really strong emotional connections with their babies during pregnancy.
Interesting. So it's not just that they were able to form these bonds, but those bonds were actually the norm.
Exactly. And even better, these strong prenatal connections were linked to those positive relationships they had with their toddlers later on.
It really is a much needed shift in perspective. We need to move away from these broad negative stereotypes and see the reality that these moms are capable of forming these deep, loving bonds with their children, and they're doing it successfully.
Couldn't agree more. Now, there's another layer to this whole thing that I found particularly fascinating, and that's the intergenerational link that the research uncovered.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that. I remember reading about that too, and it really stood out.
It's a really important point. The study found that mothers who said they had kind of a tough, difficult relationship with their own parents were actually more likely to form weaker bonds with their babies during pregnancy.
Hmm. That makes you think, doesn't it? Like, are we seeing a pattern here? Does a mother's own childhood experiences impact how she connects with her child?
It really seems that way, and it makes sense when you think about it, right? Our early experiences, especially with our parents, really shape how we view and approach relationships in general. So it's not surprising that a mother's own upbringing could influence how she connects with her baby.
That makes total sense, but it also adds another layer of complexity, right? It
Yeah.
means we need to consider a mother's own history, her own experiences, when trying to understand and support that mother-child bond.
Absolutely. And this study didn't stop there. They also looked at how these moms felt about their infants later on, and guess what? The mothers who had those difficult relationships with their own parents were also more likely to report having more negative feelings towards their infants.
Wow, so that's like a double whammy, right? Not only are they potentially struggling to form that bond during pregnancy, but those challenges might continue even after the baby is born.
Sadly, yes. But the good news is that By recognizing this pattern, we can start to break the cycle.
Right. Awareness is key. So this whole idea of prenatal bonding, it's not just some abstract concept, right? It's literally the foundation upon which that parent-child relationship is built. It's the first step and a very important one.
Absolutely. It's like laying the groundwork, creating that initial blueprint for the relationship. And we can't just dismiss those emotions as being temporary or fleeting. They really do set the stage for everything that comes after.
So if this prenatal bond is so crucial, and it seems like it really is, what does this research tell us about how we can best support new moms? Are there any practical takeaways here?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things this study suggests is that if we want to help moms build strong, healthy relationships with their children, we need to start way earlier.
Yeah.
And we need to shift our focus to supporting them during pregnancy.
That makes so much sense. Like, don't wait until the baby is born to offer support. Start during those critical 9 months when that bond is first developing.
Exactly. And Dr. Medina, who led this research, makes some really specific recommendations. One of the most important things she suggests is that we need to help young mothers understand and process their own past relationship experiences.
Okay, so that ties back to that intergenerational link we were talking about, right? Like helping them recognize how their own childhood might be impacting their feelings about becoming a parent.
Exactly. It's all about giving them the tools and support to explore those experiences and see how they might be shaping their expectations about parenthood, both the positive and the negative.
This all sounds really helpful, but what would this kind of support actually look like in practice? What are some specific things we can do to help these mothers?
Well, one really practical suggestion that Dr. Medina brings up is the idea of incorporating perinatal social workers or doulas into the care team during pregnancy.
Oh, I love that idea. Having someone there who is specifically trained to provide emotional support and guidance during that time could be so valuable.
Right. It's about having someone who can create a safe and supportive space for those moms to open up, to talk about their feelings, to process their past, and ultimately to build a healthier relationship with their unborn baby.
So it's not just about medical care, it's about providing emotional and psychological support as well. But as much as I love this idea, and I really do, there's always that question of resources, right? Can we actually make this kind of support available to everyone who needs it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, the research highlights a very real challenge here, which is, well, funding. Dr. Medina points out that we just don't have enough funding to make these kinds of programs widely accessible.
It's so frustrating, right? We have this amazing research showing us what works, what could make a real difference in the lives of mothers and children, and then we hit this roadblock.
It's a classic case of knowing what to do, but not having the resources to do it. And this really underscores the need for greater investment in early intervention and prevention programs. We know that supporting mothers during pregnancy can have huge long-term benefits, not just for the moms themselves, but for their children as well.
Absolutely. It's a smart investment, both from a human perspective and an economic one. So it sounds like there's still work to be done in this area. Is Dr. Medina continuing her research on this topic?
She is. It seems like she's particularly interested in how family and community support networks can be leveraged to further strengthen those early bonds and improve long-term outcomes.
It makes sense to look beyond just the mother and child, right?
Right.
To recognize that they exist within a larger social context.
Exactly. It's about understanding how those broader support systems, like family, friends, and community groups, can play a role in nurturing those early connections.
And this all ties back to the concept of attachment, right? Which is such a fundamental part of understanding early childhood development. For our listeners who might not be familiar with this idea, could you give us a quick breakdown of how this research fits into attachment theory?
Of course. In a nutshell, attachment theory basically says that those early bonds we form, especially with our primary caregivers, have a huge impact on our emotional and social development throughout our lives. And this research really builds on that understanding by showing us just how early those attachment processes begin. They actually looked at something called attachment representations in toddlerhood.
Okay, so attachment representations, what exactly does that mean?
Think of it as kind of a mental model or a picture that a mother has of her relationship with her child. It's how she understands and internalizes that bond. And to assess these representations, researchers use something called the working model of the child interview. It's a mouthful, I know, but we usually just call it the WMCI for short.
Got it. So the WMCI helps researchers understand how mothers think and feel about their children, right?
Exactly. It's like getting a glimpse into their internal world, understanding the narrative they have about that relationship. And the WMCI helps researchers categorize these representations into different types. So, for example, some moms might have what we call balanced representations, meaning they have a pretty realistic and coherent view of their child. They recognize both their strengths and their weaknesses, and they can talk about them in a balanced way.
That makes sense. And then there are other types of representations, right?
There are. So you might also see disengaged representations, where a mother might seem emotionally distant or dismissive of her child. And then there are distorted representations, which might involve unrealistic or overly negative views of the child.
So it's about understanding the lens through which a mother sees her child, and that lens can be shaped by all sorts of things, right?
Absolutely. And what this study found, which is really key, is that the strength of that prenatal bond, the one they measured during pregnancy, was directly linked to those representations in toddlerhood. Mothers who had a stronger bond during pregnancy were much more likely to have those balanced, healthy representations of their children later on.
That's a pretty powerful connection. So it's not just about those initial feelings, it's about how those feelings translate into a deeper understanding and perception of the child.
Exactly. And it's not just about those representations either. They also looked at the overall emotional tone that moms used when talking about their toddlers. Were they generally positive or more negative?
I'm guessing the moms with stronger prenatal bonds were more likely to express positive emotions.
You got it. They found that those moms were more positive and less negative when talking about their toddlers. And this was true even when they took into account the quality of other relationships in the mother's life. So even if a mom was having some challenges in other areas of her life, that strong prenatal bond seemed to act as a buffer, promoting a more positive outlook on her relationship with her child.
That is so fascinating. It's like that early connection provides a foundation of resilience, a source of strength that can help moms navigate the challenges of parenthood.
Exactly. And it all circles back to what we were talking about earlier, that intergenerational piece. The study also found that the quality of a young mother's relationship with her own parents was linked to both her prenatal attachment and those later attachment representations. So it's all connected.
It really is. This research paints such a clear picture of how interconnected everything is, how our past experiences shape our present, and how those early bonds, even those formed before birth, can have a lasting impact on our relationships.
It's a powerful reminder that we need to look beyond those first few moments after birth. The journey of parenthood starts much earlier, and those prenatal months are a critical time for laying the groundwork for a healthy, thriving relationship between a mother and her child.
So, to bring it all home for our listeners, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from this research?
I think the key message here is that the bond between a mother and her baby, the one that forms during pregnancy, is incredibly powerful. It's not just a fleeting feeling, it shapes the entire foundation of their relationship and can have a lasting impact on their connection for years to come.
I love that. It really flips the script on how we think about pregnancy, right? It's not just about preparing for the baby's arrival. It's about nurturing a relationship that's already blooming.
Absolutely, and it challenges us to think about how we can best support expectant mothers, especially those who might be facing additional challenges. We need to provide them with the resources and support they need to build strong, healthy bonds with their babies right from the start.
It's a call to action for all of us, really, to recognize the importance of those prenatal months and to do everything we can to ensure that all mothers have the opportunity to build those deep, loving connections with their children.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating a world where all mothers and babies have the chance to thrive, starting even before birth.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If those early months are so critical, what other subtle but powerful factors might we be overlooking?
Exactly. What else is happening during pregnancy that we haven't even begun to explore? It's exciting to think about all the discoveries that are still waiting to be made in this field.
And that's what makes this work so important. It opens up a whole new world of understanding about human development, and it gives us hope that we can continue to find new ways to support families and build stronger connections. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.